So, one of the use cases that I use Gen AI for on a daily basis is to read research papers about large language models, about Gen AI, about prompt engineering, content. And because there's so many papers, I do find that it's really nice to have like your own, basically a research assistant. Like I'll save my papers that I query from Semantic Scholar, for instance, into one central location, and from there a prompt will, a workflow will pick it up, and the prompt will kind of summarize these papers from my perspective, so that I can see, hey, which paper is relevant for me, which one should I read in full. However, if you look at these papers, it's not that they kind of excel in engagement, right? I mean, yes, I do have an academic background. I love research, but reading this still doesn't give me a very good sense of, hey, what is it that we're dealing with here? What is this about? What does it look? How does it serve me as a practitioner? What can I do with it? So I thought, well, why not ask Claude to help me out there? So I created a little project, the Interactive Paper Explorer. And basically, what I asked it to do is, well, take the paper, create my usual summary, but also suggest three projects that I could build based on, on this paper that would help me to deepen my understanding of the paper and the matter at hand. And then the next step is actually the most interesting one because, of course, I don't want to build these projects from scratch. I've got Claude artifacts, right? So I asked Claude, let the user select one of these projects and together build this project and output it as a simulation in one of your artifacts. So I gave it a try, and lo and behold, this is what Claude came up with. It's a lot of iterative prompting, and I really need to kind of sit down with Claude and learn how it works in terms of prompt engineering, prompt designing, so that I don't have to iterate that much. But look at what it came up with. It's really interesting. So it started out with some diagrams of the basic Conley architecture. I guess it's co-NLI, but I like Conley better. So forgive me for that. It's interesting, but I mean, this I could get from the paper. I mean, I still read the paper, right? So then the project that we selected was, hey, let's build a RAG system with a Conley implementation. And it would actually give me the code. And I was like, well, I don't feel like opening up my VS Code and, spinning up my virtual environments and what have you. So I'm like, can't you do a simulation like straight up front? I don't need to build it. I just need to understand. So it gave me some more code, and I think even some more code because it was actually spitting out all the components of this Conley pipeline. And then it said, oh, you want a visual interaction like simulation? Sure, let's give you a Streamlit app. I'm like, well, I don't feel like building an entire Streamlit app either. So why don't we keep it simple and you just make an artifact? And that's when it came up with this. And as soon as I see something like a React or what was the other one, Mermaid, kind of popping up in the code, I'm like, yeah, it's starting to understand. So London is the capital of France, right? And I click submit, and what it will give me is a very high level description of the Conley process, and also it's kind of lying. So I'm like, well, this is no good yet. Can't we do something else? Can you make it better? That actually works really well. Rather than prompting it on specific details, just tell it to make it 10 times better and prettify the front end. And that's actually really interesting. So I think this was the second one. I'm like, listen, I don't want you to describe the high level process. I want to know what's going on in the back end because that's what I want to learn about, right? So again, well, what's the capital of France? So it gave me a front end view and a back end view. And I still need to click this button like manually, but hey, it gives me a status indicator, and it tells me that in the backend we have document retrieval, initial response generation, and it shows me the fictitious or fictional documents it retrieved. Actually, it's not documents, it's chunks, right? And then it will show you something interesting because it will start explaining what the actual Conley process is doing. Like it takes the initial response and splits it into sentences. And then next, it will do sentence level hallucination detection. Then it will take the entities, like it will do named entity recognition within the non hallucinated sentences. So it will already ditch the hallucinated ones and then only do the entity level recognition on the hallucination free sentences. And if that's all done, the system compiles the final response that the user will see. Now, funny enough, in none of these artifacts, Claude has managed to actually give the final response, which tells me, like, hey, there's no actual LLM running in the background here, right? So it has to simulate. So that's interesting. But this is a really nice step in the right direction already. Then I said, well, make it better. And it came up with some pre-filled values that I can click. And we also decided to include a bot response because I still was hoping for Claude showing the actual final hallucination-free response. But if we now start the process, again, it will walk me through these steps and it will actually also show the output of each Conley step. So if it splits sentences, it will now actually show me how it split the sentences and also which ones are containing hallucinations. Then the same for entity level detection, it can find all the entities. So, yeah, yet another step in the right direction. And then finally, because I thought, well, I want more examples, so I told Claude to illustrate it with examples. And I meant illustration in the figurative sense, right? So use some text examples. But Claude, being Claude, of course, says, sure, I can give you illustrations. And it just started illustrating the Conley steps, which is really nice. Again, I don't know why it keeps saying documents when it should be chunks, but hey, you're forgiven, Claude. And then it crashed. So I'm like, oh, Claude, come on, please, not now. And then I think this was the one, yeah, where it kind of puts everything together, includes some random crosses. I'm not quite sure whether it knows the difference between a cross and a tick, but yeah, it gives you a really nice kind of interactive walkthrough of the Conley process in a way, to be honest, that a paper couldn't do for me unless I really sit down and take an hour to try to kind of make sense of this all. Or if I read Cobus's articles, of course, because that's where I get most of my information as well. But what I do find is that interacting with this, and also because the output is not perfect, I need to kind of start understanding the subject matter of the paper in order to be able to correct Claude. Like, hey, listen, I'm still missing some stuff. And um, I can assure you that the next step that I probably would take is like, hey, I want to incorporate this into one of my own workflows or my own pipelines. So let's get some production ready code that that in that case I would need to understand even more. So I guess that I'm learning on the fly, and that's something I absolutely enjoy. So Claude, thank you for being so imperfect because look at all the prompting I did. It's um, it's not nothing. I mean, is this saving me time? No, but is this giving me more of a mental model of how this Conley works? Absolutely. And that's what I feel is the most important. I mean, I'm not about saving time. I don't want to cram as much activity into one day. No, I want to be able to sit down and to have these little gray cells do their work and enjoy the process. So, if that's your thing, definitely go and play around with Claude because I think it's honestly quite amazing as a learning tool. Yeah, that's about it for now. Groetjes, talk soon.